Alrighty, guys. Hope everyone's doing well. This is a very, very short notice pop-up show, but y'all have known for a while because we have had it scheduled a few times and we've had some technology issues bump us up here. So today, after a few months or a month or so here, we are joined by the legendary, he won't like me saying, but legendary Doc Padgett. I've been looking forward to this for you guys to get to hear Doc speak and share his history, not just about Tailwind, but his overall military career. It's absolutely outstanding. We were just looking at some stuff offline. So before I talk any longer, I'm going to hand it off to Doc and let him introduce himself. Doc, thanks for being with us, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thanks, bud. I appreciate the kind words and comments. As far as the legend stuff goes, I'm a guy who tried to do his best with the man on the left and the man on the right supporting me, and it's a team effort always. Of course, you do as an individual what you can do and have to do, but it's a team that makes it. So yeah, Bud, you talked to me earlier and said that I might want to give a little biography. I was born in the Midwest, a place called Kankakee, and went to college for a couple of years at Illinois State, and discovered I didn't want to be a teacher. And the Vietnam War was going on, was gearing up, if you will, getting hot over there. And I have a tradition in my family going back to the Revolutionary War that every male member of my family has served in the United States Armed Forces. Considering the tradition, I wanted to do the same. But having the idea to go into the armed forces, I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I learned about special forces. I studied some of the literature, I did a little research, did some reading, and I decided that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be. I want to go into the armed forces in a specialty where I could help indigenous folks when I was deployed, and also have some military skills to help myself. And I went down to the recruiter, the Army recruiter, and said, I'd like to volunteer for Special Forces. And he looked at me and he said, son, you don't choose Special Forces. They choose you. He said, I can get you as far as airborne, but after that, you have to roll the dice. Well, if I didn't get selected for Special Forces, I was going to go and be an airborne infantryman. I knew that. Not a bad thing to do, but it's not SF. Well, I did roll the dice, and thank the good Lord, I got selected. And my scores were such that they said, well, what would you like to do? What specialty would you like? And I had considered that, and I figured the most good I could do for my team and with the indigenous personnel where I was stationed is it took about 2 years of training from entry into the Army to deployment as a Special Forces medic, but I was happy to do that, happy to graduate. And the old Barry Sadler song, 100 men will test today and only 3 win the Green Beret, that showed itself to me, especially in medical training. We went down to Fort Sam Houston, where the initial Special Forces medic training is held. And there were 55 of us on a charter flight. And when it came time to actually credential us as Special Forces medics, there were 5 of the group that remained. So that was a tough course, but it also required self-discipline during training. Bud, over to you.
Yes, sir. Here, let me get you off solo layoff here. We're always interested in while we're still kind of speaking about the early days here about Special Forces training. We're always interested in medic training because we hear throughout the decades from Vietnam to the 80s with Grenada and Iran and that, and all the way into GWAT and today. There's nothing better than having a Special Forces trained medic around. Could you talk to us a little bit about what it was like in that medic class?
Sure. We got down to Fort Sam Houston, and my group, we did the initial medic training. What the Army had in mind was that if you flunked out as a Special Forces medic, you could always be a regular conventional medic. So we went through conventional medic training first, the 8 weeks of that. Basically putting on bandages and splints and stabilizing the patient and medically evacuating and so forth. We all got through that. It wasn't a problem. we had next to our classroom building, across the parking lot, was the WAC barracks. The WACs were stationed at Fort Sam at the time. And for some of the guys, that was a diversion. But we all got through that phase. Then the 300F1 medical training came on. Right after we graduated from the leg medic course. And it was very interesting because the very first day of class, we sat down in the classroom, and our first instructor was a full bird colonel, physician. And, at that point, we knew they were serious. It was a great experience and great training. I still, somewhere in one of my footlockers, I still have my notebook, a loose leaf notebook from that course. And we did tropical medicine, sort of a condensed medical school, if you will. Now, remember that during World War II, the need for physicians was so great that some medical schools condensed their medical school training into 2 years instead of 4. And I think that's the kind of model that we had, in that they wanted to condense and give us as much information in the limited time that we had. Generally 8 hours a day, sometimes more if we had a lab to do. And, sometimes we'd go into the cadaver lab and get taught in there. And then there was homework. I mean, you had to study each and every night the material that you were just presented, and then know it because they're going to build on it the next day. That's where we lost some of our people. They failed the exams. They didn't know the material. They didn't bother to try to learn it. Myself, I had a good study buddy, another SF medic trainee, guy from Brownsville, Texas, Rich Bowie, good friend. I haven't seen him in many years, but he was my study buddy, and we'd quiz each other. We'd make up scenarios of cases, just trying to get as much studying done as we could in the limited time we had. And weekends would find us doing the same thing. Saturday, we might go to the park, Breckenridge Park there, sit down under a tree and start quizzing each other again. So it was tough. But it was a very good course. I learned a lot, was challenged, and was able to maintain my standing. So then after the 300F1, those of us who were left went to on-job training, if you will. We were deployed to different hospitals around the United States at different posts. And myself and some of my fellow students went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and we were given billets in the hospital there, which was a nice, comfortable place. But they didn't know what to do with us. We weren't regular medics. We weren't physicians. We weren't nurses. But we had the white tops on, the medical tunic, if you will. And we would put our Special Forces qualification wing backing, with our set of wings on our whites. And some of the guys would also pin on their stripes, which were PFCs at the time, who didn't really carry much weight. But they didn't really know. So we had to be active and proactive in getting the physicians and nurses and saying, hey, we're here for on-job training. Please let us help you. Let us in on what you're doing. And the physicians were really great. They showed us about suturing, incision and drainage, minor surgery. And after a few procedures, we were doing them under supervision. They trusted us. We demonstrated we were competent. And if we didn't know something, we wanted to learn it. We wanted to get taught. taking care of patients, doing IVs, dressing changes, all that stuff. But especially the surgery and the patient care aspect, and going on rounds with the docs in the hospital. It was very important to see cases, to examine patients, to get our brains working and get adjusted to patient care. Now, of course, this wasn't in the unconventional warfare setting. This was a conventional hospital, but at least we got the experience. And then after that, we went back to Fort Bragg for the advanced medical surgical lab, if you will. Now, just to keep a little confidentiality, the animals that we used during that time were not goats. They were other animals. And we were all assigned one animal. That was our patient. Now, during this time, it wasn't only the patient care business. We also had classes and advanced medical classes from the SF docs. And after those classes, generally, we would go and have lunch, and in the afternoon, we would do the surgical part. The surgical part consisted of wounding the animal while the animal was under anesthesia. There was caution taken not to cause the animal any more pain and discomfort than was necessary. But we, as SF medics, needed experience in what we would be doing. We would be taking care of wounded people. We would be not only doing the first aid part of it, but we would be doing debridement of wounds, suturing, stabilizing the patient, keeping the patient in our A camps, for example, when we couldn't get them out. We were the docs. So we had to learn all this, and we had to get hands-on. So the animal was wounded. We then had to do the surgery. We were the first surgeon on that case to debride that wound, and then care for that wound and that patient in the oncoming week or more. And if that patient died, so did your SF medic career. It was tough.
Wow.
I will reveal a little secret about myself. When it came time to do my incision on the animal's wound, I was hesitant because I'm here there with a scalpel in my hand, and there's the wound. And where do I cut? How much pressure do I put down? I did some minor surgery in OJT. This was different. This was an actual bullet wound. So I hesitated for a while, and the instructors had to get in and coach me. So I was not happy with my performance, and I don't think my instructor was happy with it either. But then there came the mass casualty phase, which you have to go through in order to pass. So you have several wounded patients at the same time. And when that happened, they didn't tell us. We were sitting in the classroom, and we heard bang, 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 bang. And the instructor comes in and says, mass casualty situation. Get your asses in the lab and let's go. So off we went. And he looked at me and he said, Padgett, you're the primary surgeon. You're the chief surgeon. Sort it out. So, and thank God I did. I directed the cases. I directed who's the assistant surgeon, who's a surgeon on this case, and so forth. And then I had my patient, which I started to work on. So having gotten through that, I was able to pass SF medic school, and we were sent then from our qualification to the last phase of unconventional warfare training, where we were the medic on a team that jumped in to your force, the Robin Sage, of which I'm sure you've heard. Did that. And then finally, we came back to the lab and had a small ceremony granting us our certificates and qualifying us as SF medics. And that was January for me. That was January of 1967.
Wow, man. Yeah. While we're still on the topic of medical, and we've already got one question in, but you mentioned the first man that came in as y'all are learning was a full bird. Did you say an SF doctor or a Army doctor?
He was an Army doctor. He was stationed there at Brooke Army Medical Center.
Okay,
His
so
name is Colonel Jewell. Colonel Jewell. I remember him well. He didn't take any nonsense, but he was thorough and very knowledgeable.
clearly so. If you remember his name to this day, that sounds like he had an impact. What is the process to become an Army doctor? And B, did you have any thoughts rumbling around at the time that, hey, I may stick around and become a doctor like this guy that's teaching?
Well, the process to become an Army doctor, as far as I know, I'm not one. I'm a PA. I've been a PA since 1973. But the process to become an Army doctor is that you graduate medical school. Obviously, you're generally board certified in something, and then you go through the application process. And there's, I'm laughing because there's a charm school, so to speak. They send you for a couple of weeks to learn how to be a soldier, right? And I've been through this because when I became commissioned as a physician assistant, and then now we're called physician associates, but as a PA, they sent me through this 2-week charm school. I'm deviating a little bit, but I was a warrant officer at the time, because when the Army did its physician assistant program, Corps, if you will, the Army Medical Specialist Corps, the chief of the Corps was adamant that he didn't want us to be commissioned. He wanted us to be warrant officers because he only wanted us to practice medicine. He didn't want us to take any command or any of that stuff that officers usually have to do besides their job. So just medical. Well, the other services, the Navy and the Air Force, were commissioning.
Mm-hmm.
So when you get out and retire, you retire as a warrant officer 4 or warrant officer rate or lieutenant colonel or colonel if you're on the commission track, right? So that's several $1,000s a year difference, not to mention the grade. So anyway, this 2-week school was very interesting. We did scenarios, and they taught us how to march and different field problems, and there was a rappelling class. But I chuckle because I went to that class having been a Special Forces medic, gone through Vietnam and jungle training in Central America and all of that, and they sent me to charm school. So I got there, and the instructor, one of the cadre, looked at me and looked at my file and closed the file and chuckled. He said, "Here, you take the second platoon." So it was a pretty good time. But anyway, that's what the physicians. There were some physicians in that class, as well as nurses and dietitians and what have you, learning how to be soldiers. And my platoon had a pretty good time. I would have nurses come up to me and pull my sleeve and say, "Could I be in your platoon?" No, get back there. So it was kind of fun. But that's how they make Army doctors. As far as myself wanting to continue medicine, when the PA profession started and training was available for that, I volunteered for it right after Vietnam. And I was fortunate and blessed enough to become a PA in 73, be picked up by University of Washington class. University of Washington was the second PA school in the nation, and I was in class 4. So I was one of the pioneers of the PA program.
Wow, that's amazing. Wow. This is one of our first questions for today while we're speaking about Fort Sam. Jason said he went through medic training at Fort Sam in 2016. We all heard that throughout the years that it was a good place to cut loose. Did you have time to have fun at Fort Sam, or were you too focused on Vietnam?
I was focused on my training. I'm not the sharpest tool in the drawer, I'll admit. I need to study. And in order to pass that course, we put a lot of study time in. Now, did we have some fun down there? Sure. Some of the guys had too much fun, and they ended up going back to Fort Bragg without being qualified, especially with the nurses. The WACs that were stationed there. But yeah, we had occasional journey to the breweries. We would take the tour at it was Pearl Brewery, and at the end of the tour, there was a safari room, you know, all the animal heads on the wall and stuff. And you got to belly up to the bar and have complimentary beer, Pearl beer. So that was good thing. And you know, the river walk was just being built at that time. It was not complete, but you kind of walk along there and look. And I remember there was the Rathskeller at the Gunter Hotel where we would go and have a beer. But you know, that was not all the time. Primarily, it was hit the books and review your study because the test is coming, and you got to be ready for it.
Wow, that's thank you for that. That was a great answer to Jason's question. And Jason, I didn't realize you were at medic training at Fort Sam as well. That's very interesting. And as we're getting ready to go to Vietnam, did you go, you also went to Vietnamese language training, didn't you? Because you were fluent in Vietnamese, weren't you? Or aren't you?
I've still maintained some fluency in Vietnamese, probably enough to get in trouble. But the Vietnamese language class was part of pre-mission training, if you will. After we graduated SF medic training, several of us were assigned to the 7th SF group for training purposes. We went through pre-mission, and they did things like, and I think it was 4 weeks, about a month. They did things like show us the weapons the enemy used, ammunition and so forth, bunkers, how to recognize booby traps, and the language training, which was important. Some of the guys, you know, just sort of tolerated it. There was, believe it or not, some ethnocentrism present. You know, why should I learn Vietnamese? But for myself, I wanted to do the best job I could with working with the indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't realize at the time that we would primarily be working with the Montagnards and some Chinese nuns and some Cambodians, and the Vietnamese would be a minority in many places, but it was still the lingua franca of everybody. It was still the primary language. Many of the yards spoke Vietnamese, Cambodians did, Nungs did fluently. So it was very useful. And if you're going out among the population, as I did on medical civic action missions, on, you know, to buy supplies sometimes off the economy, to go in and work with the indigenous health people, it is very, very helpful. And I'm going to kind of deviate from the pre-Vietnam stuff because it reminds me of a story. This is how the cup of coffee saved my life. I took my Vietnamese basic training, if you will, and when I was at Camp Kung San, which is my second camp, third technically, but generally second, at my camp. And that during that time in the Special Forces camps, we didn't have email and we didn't have, you know, the TV and stuff. We get occasional movie, but it was slow at night. You read, maybe played poker with the guys, whatever. Well, what I chose to do was every night was sit down with an interpreter and improve my Vietnamese language skills. Now, I couldn't read or write, but I could speak very well. But nobody knew about it. None of the people, the indigenous folks knew. A few guys on the team knew because they'd seen me studying. So we went on a patrol. There were about 100 of us, indig, you know, maybe 4 or 5 Americans, about 100 indig. And we got into contact. It was just very minor, few shots exchanged between us and the VC, and they ran. So we kind of searched for him a little bit, couldn't find him, drew everybody back in and carried on, made camp in a pretty secure location. So the next morning, we felt secure enough that we could make a fire. And we made a fire to heat our rations or heat water for tea or coffee. That terrible sea ration coffee, but better than no coffee. So I went over with my rifle and my canteen cup with water to boil water for the coffee. And there are 2 Vietnamese there with their cups trying to warm water for tea. And one of them turns to the other and says, okay, the plan is that we shoot the Americans and we just run for the jungle. And his buddy kind of looked up at me and kind of went like, oh, there's an American here. And the other guy says, no, it's all right. They're stupid. None of them speak our language anyway. So I sat down my cup, took my rifle off the sling, went bam, and hit the guy who was standing up and drew down on the guy who was next to the fire. And they started screaming, oh, the American hit me, the American hit me. And I leaned, and the sergeant, their sergeant came over and, what's going on? The American hit me. And I looked down at him and in Vietnamese said, tell the sergeant how you want to kill the Americans and run to the jungle. And his face fell. And both of those guys went back to camp with their hands tied behind their backs. So, cup of coffee.
My God. That, I mean, I hear a lot, and we've spoken to a few guys that said, we'd have an interpreter and I'd bond with him, so there's no need for me to learn Vietnamese. But something just like that, to where you hear it either in passing or you're right there, and they think, oh, he's a dumb American like the others that don't care to learn our language. I can say I want to kill him right here in front of him.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
and of course, if you're in a firefight,
absolutely.
If you're in a firefight and you're shouting commands, shout them in Vietnamese, not English. That's me.
It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, if you're in a firefight and you're shouting, come on, get the first platoon over on the left. If you say that in English, you're going to get more incoming fire from the bad guys. If you say it in Vietnamese, maybe not so much. So that's another incentive,
That's slick right there. That's slick. Wow. What a story. I don't know if you've ever told me that. And if you have, I've utterly forgotten, because that is one of the wildest stories I've ever heard. That's pucker factor inducing to the maximum. Whew. Wow. And you mentioned a camp just a second ago. Did you and you were in 7th group pre-Vietnam? Did you have any choice? Did you know, were there any murmurs of SOG or CNC, as that y'all were calling it, or were you kind of just going straight to an A camp right off the bat? And which A camp? What was that first one?
Yeah, it's time for another story.
That's fine. That's fine.
There were 7 of us that were, we all volunteered for Vietnam, but there were 7 of us medics that were trained together, that went, all the way through pre-mission together, and 7 of us who went on the same aircraft to the Pacific. Now, it was interesting that our aircraft didn't go all the way to Vietnam. It stopped in the Philippines and discharged some guys who were stationed there. And the rest of us changed aircraft to a smaller aircraft. And we came in on a jet. We went on a prop plane. And instead of landing at Tan Son Nhut and going to one of the bases there for orientation, if you will, we landed in Pleiku. Now, it wasn't what we were expecting, but okay, there's a reception station there. We'll go there. And we checked in and we're assigned barracks, and you guys will be assigned to your unit shortly. Well, they started talking about conventional units that needed medics, and they wanted to assign us to conventional units. And wait a minute, we've been training for 2 years as SF medics. We're special forces. We want to go with our guys. We want to go with our unit, not some leg infantry. I'm sorry, we can't. No, you guys are going to go. We're going to get orders. You're going to go where we assign you. Well, what can we do? We've got to contact the Special Forces people and tell them we're here, because they value us and they want us. How can we do that? They won't let us in the orderly room to get on the phone to the unit in Pleiku, the C team. What can we do? Well, we are SF after all, right? So it just so happened that a couple of our guys, the next afternoon, got in a push and shoving contest with each other, and just yelling at each other, occasional punch thrown and wrestling on the ground. It was terrible. Well, that drew everybody to look at the fight, including the people in the orderly room.
Oh.
There was a phone book right on the desk next to the phone. It didn't take much to call the Special Forces compound and then slide out again. And then the fight stopped. They kind of shook hands and everything was okay. And early the next morning, into the reception station comes a 3/4 ton truck with a sergeant major with a green beret on and 4 armed montagnards in the back of the truck. Where are my people? So that sort of settled that. We got our gear, put it in the truck, got it in the truck, and went over to the C team. Thank heavens. So my first assignment was to a camp called Bong Son, which was actually in the process of closing. Bong Son has a pretty good history. There was a pretty good fight there the year before. But Bong Son was closing because it was kind of the town was growing around it, but B, the airstrip that they'd made at Bong Son was taken over by the first CAF, and they started calling it LZ English instead of Camp Bong Son. So yeah, we're in the process of closing, but there are some interesting things that happened there. I don't think we have time for me to go through all of them, but that was it'll be in my book. But so we're in the process of closing that camp and building a new camp in a place called Hatchet, which was, I can't give you an exact kilometer, but it was, we would go on Highway 1 and then go on the 506 highway, and it was about an hour and a half to 2 hours of drive, as I remember. By helicopter, it'd probably be 15, 20 minutes. But we started building a new camp. It was a fire base for the 173rd, and they had everything from 175s to 8 inches to 105s, and we started building that camp. And I was assigned to Bong Son because the medic of that team was on leave. So when he came back, it was time for me to go away and go someplace else. So the second camp I was assigned to was, there's Bong Son, and Hatay. It's not on the map. 506 is not on the map, but Hatay was in a strategic location there. There was the road which passed by the camp. It took a turn and then went eventually back to Highway 1. It was kind of a semicircular to serve that little valley in the area there. And there were mountains that began just outside of the camp and then worked their way up to a higher elevation. Some deserted villages in there. At any event, after that camp, was assigned to a place called Kung San. Kung San was an interesting camp in that it was way up on a hill dominating the valley. And there's a village down below, a little town, which is accessible to Highway 1 by road, but the road was closed because it went through mountains and was easily ambushed. I remember going over it in a recon on a helicopter and seeing a APC on its side that had been ambushed there. But the camp was an interesting camp. We had Montagnards and Vietnamese there. We had a Vietnamese Special Forces team that was nominally in command. I don't know if you've been told, but the American Special Forces team in the A camps was not officially in command. We were advisors, but usually it ended up that the Americans were the authority. But officially, the Vietnamese Special Forces were in command. Problem with the Vietnamese Special Forces from time to time was that they weren't really aggressive and wanting to do a lot of missions. You've probably heard that story. But there were some who were excellent, and a lot of them had an axe to grind against the communists, and were excellent. But just one story from Kung San is that I would take care of the families of the indigenous as well as the indigenous troops. And there was a woman that came in, was very ill, feverish, and she had swelling and some breakdown of some of the lumps of swelling in her groin and up in her axilla. And she had bubonic plague. So, how does this young Special Forces medic manage an outbreak of bubonic plague? Well, we got on immediately to the Special Forces base in Yatrang, SFOB, and they sent up not only vaccine, but a physician and a medical team to help. And in the meantime, I was treating her and trying to identify any other cases. And that the bubonic plague is transmitted by the rat flea. Bites the rat, bites the human. So that their longhouse at the base of the hill where the camp was, that was an indigenous longhouse with many families, mountain yards. And they lived in close quarters, side by side. And it was out of bamboo wall and a thatched roof, and just ideal situation for rats. Mm-hmm. So we determined that we were going to build them a new longhouse made out of cement block and tin roof. However, the old one had to go, and we had to kill the rats, and so we burned it. We had a shoulder to shoulder men around the longhouse, everybody with a shovel or an axe or something that they could beat the rats with as they came out. So we fired the house, and with everybody out, of course, and all their belongings. We fired the house. Rats came out. It was open season on rats, and we burned them too. And we burned a lot of the bedding and so forth of the families, looking for any place that the fleas would be, and generally got the situation under control. But it was touch and go for a while. So, and there were other things that happened in Kung San. Again, I'll have it in my book. Then after Kung San, well, not after Kung San, but as a part of my training for Kung San, they sent me to Forward Observer School. They had actually a 105 at Kung San, so they wanted somebody to help work it. Well, they sent me to Forward Observer School, and I did well there. I enjoyed it a lot, and we were having our graduation exercise, and we were sitting on bleachers, and in comes a helicopter, just right, not too far from the bleachers, Huey. And I'm thinking, well, it must be a VIP and come out there and maybe talk to us or something. And the door gunner jumped down, and he strolled over to the bleachers and said, "Sergeant Padgett." Oh, okay. So he said, "Get your shit and get on the helicopter," which I did. And off I went. I still don't know, did I do something? And I'm going to Long Beach jail. I mean, what's going on? So we flew over to Quinyan on the coast, and there was smoke come out of several locations in Quinyan. What the heck is going on? Well, that was Tet. Tet of 1968. So they landed me on the beach, and the B team that controlled my A team and several others was in a compound right off the beach. Tough duty, huh? And they dropped me off there, and I saw several prisoners with their hands behind their backs sitting on the beach. And at this time, I had chosen to carry a grease gun, a 45 caliber grease gun, because I didn't like the round of the M16. But I had the grease gun because we were generally, if you got in contact, it was close up anyway. So they asked me, they said, "Okay, what I want you to do is take these prisoners." It was Quinyan. Yeah. Take these prisoners and under guard and if they do anything that they shouldn't, take them out. Yes, okay, Sergeant Major. So there was that, and then there was some other fighting that I supported. It's a long story, but as a result of my being there and helping out with the fighting around Quy Nhon, I was asked to join the Mobile Strike Force Battalion, which was being formed there in Quy Nhon. And as the man says, that's another story. Mobile Strike Force was good duty. It was some of the best time that I'd spent in Vietnam. We trained 2 companies of strike force along with the headquarters element and a recon platoon. And we trained them to be aggressive, think for themselves, think on their feet. But being aggressive was something that the enemy wasn't ready for on many occasions, because we'd get in a fight and we would generally assault them, flank them. Very rarely did we stop and try and call in artillery or air support or what have you initially. We just move on the enemy, and a lot of times they were dumbfounded because they were used to the Americans. Initially, when they got in contact, they'd stop, draw back, form a perimeter, call for artillery, call for air, what have you. That wasn't our initial response. But, of course, we did use air, gunships, and what have you when the situation called for it and when we could get them. But remember that we were, as technically, an indigenous unit. Mm-hmm. So we weren't priority for air and artillery. We carried 60 millimeter mortars and machine guns, of course, which are very helpful. But the Mobile Strike Force, the thing about the Mike Force, if you go into Mike Force, you know that you're going to see action, because the whole mission is to relieve ACAMPs in trouble and go out and find the bad guys.
Now, I was just fixing to, yes, sir. I was fixing to say, I mean, everyone you speak to, we've spoken to a few Mike Force men that went into SOG. We actually just spoke to David Lucier, who replaced you when you went over to CCC, and that everyone says it, that the Mike Force men were a different breed of men altogether. I mean, anytime y'all went out, y'all know, or you knew you were getting in a rough up in one day or another. Y'all went out for a while. I mean, I've heard stories of y'all's clothes rotting off of y'all and having to get some sent in. But I mean, y'all were out there just roughing it and kicking tail.
Yeah, about the clothes rotting off, there was one contact that we made that apparently was a headquarters unit, the VC, traveling down the trail, and we hit him. And I got the backpack of this one guy, and my tiger stripe shirt was, as you say, it wasn't rotting off, but it was in bad shape, torn and what have you. So I got in his pack, and he had a powder blue shirt, long sleeve shirt. And I think it was part of a dress uniform for the VC. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen a lot of them. But, he had little badges and stuff in there. And a powder blue shirt. And at that time, I was several pounds lighter. And I put on the shirt and it fit. I said, okay, that's good. This will blend in a little bit with the greenery. So I scored a shirt as a war trophy and wore it until we got back out of the field, which wasn't too long, because we were to close on an American unit that had set up a perimeter not far away from us. Oh. And there's another thing, that another sort of stuff that happened. But we tried and were successful in contacting this American unit by radio. Okay, we're here, you're there, we're coming into you. We've been told to close on your location. We're coming in. We'll be evacuated by helicopter from the LC that you guys have set up. Okay, roger that. So that was about 2 hours out. An hour out, we call them again. Okay, we got very close to them, call them again. Say, we're coming in. Okay, don't shoot us. We've got indigenous people. We're coming into your perimeter. We've got to understand. Sorry about that. Let me turn this off. Roger that. Understand. So in we go. And what happens? They shoot us. Right? Somebody didn't give somebody the word, right? And they wounded 2 of our guys and didn't shoot any Americans. But we got up right at the tree line and started yelling at them, "We're Americans, don't shoot. We're Americans." And finally, they stopped. And one of the NCOs came into the perimeter and said, "Oh, come on up." So we came out with our weapons above our head and said, "Don't shoot us." And were we pissed? Oh, we were pissed because we've been calling them, right, for hours saying we're coming in. And they bother to freaking tell their people on the perimeter? Apparently not. So that was bad. And I actually got on the chopper, the MEDEVAC that came in for our guys, and went back to the hospital with them, having bandaged them myself. But another problem we had, because they were indigenous, they were guaranteed, Mike Force people were guaranteed by us, if you get hit, you go to an American medical facility. Mm-hmm. But very often, if there wasn't one of us there, they'd get stabilized and sent to the Vietnamese facility. No, and where they would die in the hallway, But okay, so I went in and made sure that they got attention, and then I beat feet back to my compound. I was a sight. I had tiger striped pants, a powder blue shirt, my hat, M16, and a beard. Right. So yeah, they thought I was from outer space or something, I think. But I finally got back to the compound, and the rest of the guys were evacuated as soon as they got helicopters to get them back to the camp.
Jeez, we had a good photo of you outside the headquarters with in front of the 4th Battalion sign. But I mean the Mike Forces.
That photograph, Bud, was right after the Battle of Ben Het. I've got it on my wall here at my home. Wow. Right after the Battle of Ben Het, and coming right out of the field, and somebody wanted to document that. I don't know who it was, but they took that picture. Yeah, that was a fight. That was a fight. And right after that, after Ben Het, shortly after that, I had to leave, went back to the States, and then went to the 46th Company in Thailand. Ran a dispensary there. Our Camp Camp Nong Taku was our camp. And the camp's primary mission was classified. They were training Lao airborne and commandos for the fight against the communists in Laos. They would bring them in C-130, drop them at the airstrip at the camp overnight, and take off again. And nobody really would see them. I never got to interact with them at all because I was the cover. There were 2 facilities run by Americans in Thailand authorized to treat indigenous personnel, the population, if you will. One was the 5th Field Hospital in Bangkok. The other was me. And I saw hundreds of patients a month. I had an 8-bed holding facility where I could admit the really sick ones and take care of them. I had an evacuation possibility in that if something was really severe, they would send a helicopter for me. That happened once or twice. But generally, we were out by ourselves in a rural area. To get to the nearest hospital was a country road, to another paved country road, to the main hardtop, which the town that we were near didn't have really a very good hospital. And the main hospital was in Karat, which is, again, hours away. So I held a lot of them, treated a lot of them. There was a lot of malaria, parasites, dysentery, on and on. I was very happy to have had that tropical medicine course, and I had SF, provided us with good resources. I had a very nice tropical medicine book, dermatology manual, and so forth, and I was able to. I had a lab there, limited lab. We could do malaria smears and get gram stains and what have you. And we had an X-ray, believe it or not, where we could do limited stuff, musculoskeletal primarily. It was a good gig. I had a great interpreter, and we were well supported. So they wanted to keep it going. I remember some VIPs coming through. There was I think it was a 2-star general, and some colonels came in, the visiting fireman kind of thing. And I had some patients in the dispensary, and I put on my white coat, and gave them the tour, and it was good. It's a good gig. I really enjoy taking care of patients anyway. It's no combat at that particular time, except with the diseases. And then after that was done, I wanted to go back to Vietnam and volunteer for SOG, which I did, and spent how many months? Let's see, about a year and 2 months, a year and 3 months.
Wow. On the 46, as we're going into, and I'm sure that's going to be a part of your book. So, some of the stuff we won't get into. That makes me, before I ask that question, guys, a little y'all asked me about books and what I'm reading and what I recommend reading. This is a book. I dare not. Maybe Doc can pronounce the last name for me. Hans Halberstadt.
Halberstadt.
Halberstadt. He wrote War Stories of the Green Berets. This is the updated version with some of the GWAT veterans in the back, but the first is Vietnam veterans, and Doc is actually featured in about 7 or 8 pages with several different stories, and it is absolutely amazing work. And actually how he ends up meeting his future wife on one wild occasion, which I'm sure will be in the book. But about the 46, you mentioned it's as we found out, or I'll find out in the group talking to Captain David Carr and some of the other SOG vets, it was very secret. Tony Poe's popping up over there. Vang Powell is over there. Were you mostly working on all comers? Were there military action wounds coming from the Laos, the Thai soldiers, or
no? There were no combat wounds. There was some trauma because there would be accidents, people in the jungle trying to cut trees, cutting themselves with axes or machetes, what have you. Sometimes a motorcycle or a vehicle would go off the road, turn over, broken this, broken that. Lacerations, what have you. So there was trauma there. Not a lot. Most of it was tropical medicine stuff. Let me see what I can. All right. Do you see? Move your hands straight up. Straight up. You'll see something called Pak Chom. No, down, and down, and almost stop. Go left.
Oh,
see Pak Chom?
Yes, sir. Okay.
That was a town where we were near, and it's not there, but we were probably half an hour out of that town by road, half an hour, 45 minutes, but with a Jeep, so that we would sometimes go in for the chow run, get vegetables and meat, what have you. Sometimes we go in and have a beer on weekends, but the medical facility there was not good, and we'd have to go up to Nakhon. You can see Nakhon Ratchasima. That would be the place where we would evacuate our patients to.
Wow. I wanted to bring that up because I'm interested in all of the sites. There's several around here that I'm most familiar with. Is it Lopbur? I can't even.
Lopburi.
Lopebury. Several of the men I know were at Lopebury. And
Yeah,
Fitz and
that's where the 46 was headquartered.
Fitsanula
And
Camp Fitz.
Pitsanaluk, yeah,
And
Pitsanaluk.
yeah, very interesting. That I hope some of your book will mention a little bit about the 46th. I find it to be a very interesting group and what y'all are doing over there. It's secretive, as you said, so not a lot is known unless you get little tidbits from veterans. But I've always found it to be very interesting with the influx of SOG men, CIA around, and all of that. But so you mentioned now, is there any off time between Thailand and going back to Vietnam? Do you go home, or are you going from 46
Just
to?
a 30-day leave and then back and over
Wow.
to the fifth group, and got in the fifth group. Talked to the sergeant major. Said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "CCC." He said they need medics, and off I went. And found out when I got there that I was a senior medic. So started up, and I had several medics that were working for me, and SF guys are a different breed, and it's like instead of the expression herding cats, it's like herding lions, And the guys had their own opinions about stuff, but generally speaking, we got along very well. I had a roster of chase medic time, and put myself on it too. Now, for those who are new to your channel, a chase medic was a medic who would get on the helicopter, generally for the insertion of a team in case they took hits going in. The chase medic would start treating the patient on the helicopter. Also, when the team got in trouble and was evacuated, the medic would be on the helicopter to do the same thing, to start treatment. And if you're a chase medic going in to rescue a team, that you're going into a firefight, basically. And there were a few instances where had to shoot. But again, the dispensary there was to take care of our troops, both American and indigenous. Mm-hmm. We had a ward, pretty good. I can't remember how many beds. I would think about 10 or 12. We had a very good indigenous nursing staff. I had indigenous nurses who were well trained before I got there, and I sort of kept up their training and taught them to do things. One of my favorite memories is of one of my nurses who had on her cap and her mask and her surgical gown, and I'm across the table from her, and we're doing treatment of a wound, a surgical. I think we were taking a bullet and shrapnel out of somebody, and I look up, and all I can see is the eyes, and her working diligently with me, and we're still friends. I see her at the SOAR almost every year and say hi, go along with another couple of nurses that I had worked with and trained. But they were good. And of course, most of them, I think all of them, 100% were good looking. Where is my nurse?
Pocahontas, right there.
Yeah, that's her. That's the one with and if you kind of put your finger over the nose and the forehead, that's all I was looking at when we were working together. Good folks, good people, and we had some guys you can see that worked with us as well. We had Sam, who was our lab tech, and we had X-ray guys, and we did, I think, a good job. We had treatment rooms. We had a waiting area where patients would come in. Usually, the indigenous families would come in during sick call hours and be examined and treated. We had a pharmacy there where we kept our medicines, and we had a safe where we kept the narcotics. It was good facility. It was run well. Not my credit, but I was just running well before I got there. Just continued it. But I enjoyed treating the wounded. I didn't enjoy seeing them get wounded, but I enjoyed treating them. And some of the indigenous, I recall there was one of our troopers, indigenous guy. I think he was Vietnamese. His dad had a shop, an auto shop in Kontum town, and was handling gasoline, and the gasoline went up, and he got badly burned. He went to the Vietnamese hospital, and they told him there wasn't much they could do for him. His family took him, and the son came to see me, and he said, "Can you help me?" And I said, "Well, bring him in. You know, we'll do what we can do as long as we can get clearance from the security detachment to bring him through the gate. Then I can treat him." So he went out to the gate and brought his dad in, and I went out to speak to the security folks, and we cleared him to come in. And he was a mess. He was burned over most of the anterior surface of his body. And we just basically started a little surgical treatment on him to debride the wounds, get the infected stuff off, and every day a dressing change, little antibiotic therapy to work on the infection, and some pain medicine. And he did much, much better after a couple of weeks. He was able to be discharged and walked and talked, and you know he will have scars the rest of his life. But
Wow.
That was just one case. But I enjoyed doing that. And then I got detailed to help start a couple of new reaction force companies across the river in the Mike Force compound, because the Mike Force had been disbanded by then, and we had the old compound. And I started a dispensary over there for C&D companies.
Were the let's see, and yes, I enjoy hearing about the not just working on Americans. I've heard several stories from guys or read in posts on Facebook. One that pops out is the 1971 122 millimeter rocket attack that they were trying to hit the guys at CCC, or Task Force 2 at that time. And some of them fell short, hitting the village. And Earl Metcalf and some of the medics went out and started working on the villagers and all of that, and saved numerous lives from a short rocket that was intended for them that hit the villagers. And there's just countless tales of you guys doing stuff like that. I absolutely love hearing those stories.
All right. Well, Bud, I'm going to have to ring off pretty soon.
Okay, that's fine.
Any
can you
before I go?
You know, we've covered a lot. We didn't get to Tailwind. I'm taking you're going to cover that in detail in the book, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's covered well also in John Plaster's book, and a couple of others, of course.
Oh yes, Mr. Barry Pinchek's book. And we've had a few of those men on that were on the mission, and we've actually had one of the pilots that was there, that the Cobra pilot that was working for you guys, the one of the Pink Panthers. And I've actually got a photo of y'all's crashed CH-53 in the riverbank there. Quite a photo. You know what? Let me bring that up as we're closing out here. I think you've got a smidge of time here. Actually, you know what? It won't let me pull it up for some reason. I apologize about that. But yes, I hate to cut it short, guys. Doc's running short. He's got an extensive career after Tailwind that goes on. He goes on to Panama, and spends a total of, I believe, is it 29 years or is it 30 years in the military?
Well, active and reserve, 40 years.
And there's Doc and Phil
65 to
Gonzalez in
2000.
Panama right there.
That's El Salvador.
Oh, El Salvador. Good Lord. I thought it was Panama. Wow. That's a wonderful photo. You know what? How about we'll stick a pin in it, and if you would be so kind, maybe after you get the book out, you can do a little promotion tour and come speak to us again once you cover the stuff in the book.
I would be delighted. I have one last closeout story for you.
Go ahead.
It's kind of humorous. And as a reservist, I went to, after the 12th Special Forces group closed, I went to a civil affairs unit, and I was selected to be part of a team that went into Kazakhstan, which is the first American military unit to go in there. And when we arrived at the location, Tolgi Korgan Hospital, we were escorted to the auditorium where there was something going on that went on each year. And there was something called the Best Nurse Competition. And each ward would put up a nurse to do something. They would have a talent like singing or flower arranging or something. And they would also do medical tasks and get judged for the best nurse. And the best nurse would win some small appliance or something, which was a big deal in the former Soviet Union. So we went in there and I was assigned an interpreter, a young Kazakh lieutenant who sat next to me, a very good English speaker. And they were doing their thing up on stage, and he looked at me and looked at my uniform, and he said, "What's that patch on your right shoulder?" I said, that's a combat patch. American military unit, when they go into combat with a unit, they'll put that on for later on to just show that they were in combat with a unit. And he said, "Is that a Special Forces patch?" I said, yes it is. I said, "Oh, were you in Vietnam?" He said, "Yes, I was." He said, "Were you in Laos?" I said, "Well, that's a very nice competition going on up there, isn't it? That's a good-looking girl." And he said, No, you can tell me." And I'm thinking, well, the classification has been off for a few years now, so I can discuss it. And I said, yeah, I was. Well, we started talking about where I was and what I did, and a bit about TAILWIND. And it turns out that his dad was the Russian advisor, Soviet advisor, to the North Vietnamese anti-aircraft unit that tried to shoot me down. So that's a small world. Yeah, small world.
That's one of my favorite stories right there, and I'm so glad you told that to
Oh,
Till.
there we are.
Yeah, there you are right there. I don't know which one is you, but
I'm the first guy next to the helicopter.
Oh, you're number one.
Yeah. The story on that is that when we crashed the first time, I got out with the SF Medic and I got our bags and our guns and we went out, and we just happened to have crashed into the North Vietnamese fortification, but there wasn't anybody home. So I got out and I got in a position and I put him in a position. I looked back and the crew was still in the doorway, the hatchway of the aircraft. So I went and got them and put them out in a perimeter with their weapons, and expecting that we would be assaulted at any time. And about, I don't know, seemed like forever, probably about 15, 20 minutes, another helicopter came over, dropped a rope ladder to us. So I went to the rope ladder and I steadied it and I told them, come on, get on, get up, let's go, get up. And they all stood there and looked at me. They didn't move. I said, well, screw this, follow me. And I went. And they got the message and they also went up the ladder. But that's why I'm the first one up there.
There's Doc and Mike Hagan, and I'm not sure who that gentleman is over here, but had to be around the time of TAILWIND right there.
Yeah, I think so.
You've got some great photos. That is, I can't thank you enough for coming and spending an hour with us. And there's one more for you guys. I know you all love the photos. Doc Padgett with Mike Shepard, the werewolf, on a mission with a rocket tube in his hand. We can't thank you enough. And again, when you do get the book written, we would absolutely love to have you on and you talk to us, and if we can ask you a little bit of questions about the book when you get it done.
I appreciate that, but I just want to thank you for your interest, research, and publication of the SOG story and the Special Forces story, because it's a part of history that needs to be preserved and passed on. So thank you for what you do, and bless you and your listeners as well.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you so much, sir. You have a wonderful day. We thank you.
To you, brother. Okay. Bye, everyone.